In this lesson, we're going to look at the vocals. Now, I'm slightly out of sync with the way I'd normally do them, and this is mainly down to a kind of classroom management perspective from my own kind of selfish needs and getting all my students to record their vocals and get all their audio parts done as quickly as possible to free up studio and vocal booth time. So that's the reason I put it in here, and also it's a good point to see how your mix is working. You can't really put a vocal in until you've got the piano part down. You can't really put a vocal in until you've got a good establishment of rhythm because your pitches will be off. So at this point, I've got enough information for the vocalist to go on to actually produce a really good vocal, and that's what's happened here. So I'm really pleased with how my vocals turned out, and I'm really glad with how my balance is turning out. As said in previous lessons, I am continuously editing all of my previous tracks. So since the last time I saw you, I've already edited my drums a little bit further. I've already edited my piano a little bit further. And now I'm sitting my vocal in the mix. And as you add more parts, you really need to reevaluate where your older parts were at, just to make sure that it all makes sense and to make sure it's all kind of working. If something isn't working, it is a good idea to kind of correct it. The only thing I haven't done so far is the automation. Now, there is a fluctuation automation within the parts, so I'm going to leave that probably till the end when we do the mixing session of this piece. So don't worry too much, think, oh, that should be loud at that point. But it is important to kind of keep in mind that we are trying to find a general level at the moment rather than the actual level, because the volumes of these tracks do go up and down as the piece develops. So it's going to be really hard for you to get it completely 100% right, because what you'll find is that the verse, it'll all work absolutely perfectly and you'll listen to your actual mix and it'll be working absolutely perfectly, but then by the time you get to chorus, things change. Now, the inclination for people that just start out is, oh, I'll just pull that down now then. And the minute you pull something down or pull it up, the verse then no longer works. So you do have to keep this in mind. So, I mean, if you do feel that you want to make these adjustments as you go along, by all means feel free to press the A button and then go into your automation and make your automation changes, and that'll be fine. But do keep in mind that anything you change up here, volume wise, or anything actually, it is a destructive process for what happens earlier, especially if you're kind of in a good place with it earlier on, because the piece does develop and that does happen. Okay, so the vocals, fairly straightforward. Let's look at some of the processing. So straight away I've come in and done some EQ. My EQ is based on how my vocalist is. She's got quite a high tonal voice. So she's pulling out a lot of sibilants. So we've had to kind of cut some of the sibilants, and she hasn't got much of this kind of bottom end warmth to her vocal, so we've had to pull out some of the bottom end, and this is really at the verge of where her vocal is. She's around here somewhere, so I'm only just touching on it just to give it a bit of warmth to the actual sound itself. This will really depend on what your vocalist is doing, so it will be completely different to mine. One thing I haven't said, because this is one of your must-do audio tracks, remember you do have to set up the vocal properly. So make sure you've got a pop shield. Make sure you've got an isolated space. We don't want any noise going into the vocal mic. Make sure you've set up everything properly. So you've got a pop shield. Make sure your vocalist is on axis and approximately 10 centimeters away from the mic. Depending on how loud her voice is, of course. Make sure that you are monitoring the levels for no distortion. And once again, also make sure she's got closed back headphones, or if you use a he, make sure they've got closed back headphones so that the noise from your recording isn't spilling into the microphone. This track has to be completely and utterly clean. In order to score the highest possible marks, it has to be a really clean, well recorded vocal, okay? So just keep that in mind. So that's how I've started, and this is a really nice, clean vocal. After doing the EQ, we've added a bit of compression. Now, the compression for this particular vocal is quite hard, and because of the way it sits in the mix, I've made it that way. So you might not need that. You might have a really good vocalist that's quite consistent and the vocal range, but I've actually gone for a really hard compression. This is kind of unlike me normally. Normally I stick with my vocals around the 5:1, but I've gone for this 8:1 compression ratio and this plus 25 threshold, and it's given me quite a lot of gain reduction. I've gone for this +4 as well, so I'm putting all the gain back this time to make it the vocal as punchy as possible, okay? So once again, this is all really determined on how your vocalist is, on how well they sit in the mix, so you will have to change that. If you're unsure about compression, there's a video on the webinar pages currently that deals with compression, and there's also some presentations on how to deal with compression, and there's lots of other stuff on musictechstudent.co.uk that can help you understand compression further, okay? So please go and visit those if you are not aware of how to use compression properly. The next thing is obviously our standard across the track reverb. I haven't edited this yet. In the last video I said that that was going to be one of my next missions, so I'm still going to edit this. I haven't touched it at the moment. And then finally, there is delay on this one. I'm using a tape delay, and I'll share this screenshot with you on the lesson, but I'm using a tape delay to give it that kind of fluttery sound at the end of it, at the end of each of the phrases, okay? So make sure you do that. Make sure you do have a nice delay. It's quite a rich delay that the vocal's using on this one, so make sure you do. I'm using this preset of 1:16, okay, and it's a slap back delay. Finally, or not finally, but nextly, the panning position of the vocal, because it's the main vocal, is pretty much always in the center of the mix, okay? So looking at the way our mix is developing, we've got our piano on the right side of the speaker. We've got our drum tracks predominantly towards the left side of the speaker on our percussion tracks, okay? And then the vocal is going to sit in the middle. So in terms of panning, we've already created quite a lot of space for this vocal to sit. I've brought it down in the mix a bit. The compression's doing a really good job, so I've brought it down in the mix a little bit to kind of make it sit a little bit better. Once again, I am going to have to automate this as I go through. It does change. Let's have a listen to the vocal from the song, and then I'll show you my vocal.
You won't find him drinking at the table.
Okay, now let's do my one.
You won't find him drinking at the table. Rolling dice, staying out to 3. You won't ever find him being unfaithful. You will find him, you'll find him next to me. You won't find him trying to chase the devil for money.
Okay, so you can hear that compared to the Next to Me track, theirs is quite a lot warmer. Mine's still suffering from some of this trebly sounds that's built into the vocalist's voice. I will continue to edit that, and I will continue to try and make it a stronger vocal, and I will try and kind of get more out of that. It's going to be a fairly hard job to get it exactly the same. So for now, just make sure you're balancing it appropriately within the mix, so it's sitting at the appropriate place in the mix. And as you add more instruments, you will have to adjust this. This is why I said to you earlier, it might be a good idea just to wait before you start adding the automation, because it will still change. There's still a few instruments to go in, so it will still change. Before I leave you to get on with your vocal, make sure you record that at the earliest possible convenience. Don't leave it to the end when all the submissions happen. Get it done as early as possible. Let me just play you my vocal, and I'll show you some of the parameters that are actually happening. So here's my vocal on its own.
You won't find him drinking at the table. Rolling dice, staying out to 3. You won't ever find him being unfaithful. You will find him, you'll find him next to me.
So let's do a few things here. Let's show you guys what it sounded like before some of this processing was applied. So let's turn off each of the processing and let's just add it a little bit at a time. Okay, so here we go.
You won't find him drinking at the table. Rolling dice.
I've still got the reverb on this. Let me turn that off as well.
Staying out to 3. You won't ever find him being unfaithful. You will find him, you'll find him next to me.
And as you can hear, it's a really clean vocal, and that's so important. To score the highest marks with how the vocal sits in the mix, making sure you've got that really nice clean vocal is so important. Let me just play it one more time without anything on, then we'll start adding stuff. So straight away, no noise.
You won't find him drinking at the table. Rolling dice, staying out to 3.
If you do struggle with the breathy sounds, one thing you should be using is a gate as well. And you can put a gate at the beginning of your chain just to cut out any of that breathy sounds. And that's one of the reasons, and you can't see it here because I did this on the input channel, but that's one of the reasons you've got no noise at all. It's because the gate is working so efficiently that it's just cutting out a lot of that breathy noise. You've got to be careful with gating. Because you can cut off some of the phrasing, okay? Once again, there's some nice tutorials on musictechstudent.co.uk to have a look at how to gate properly, okay?
You won't find him drinking at the table.
So let's add the reverb.
Rolling dice and staying out to 3. You won't ever find him being
Now let's add
unfaithful. You will
delay.
find him, you'll find.
So I'll stop it, and then we'll just add the delay this time.
You won't find him drinking at the table. Rolling dice and staying out to 3. You won't ever find him being unfaithful.
So I've got it quite subtle, but actually theirs is a lot more prominent than mine. So you might want to have another tweak with that and just kind of work something out. But I've left it quite subtle at the moment. Okay, so now let's add the compression. So you should hear the sound flatten out a little bit now.
You won't find him drinking at the table.
Got a lot of gain reduction.
Rolling dice and staying out to 3. You won't ever find him being unfaithful. You will find him, you'll find.
Okay, and finally, let's add the EQ.
You won't find him drinking at the table. Rolling dice and staying out to 3.
And the EQ is very, very subtle. It's not much there at all, really. So if we need to, we've still got a lot of space that we can sculpt the EQ. Okay, that's it from me. Once again, I'll give you all these screenshots so you can have a nice starting point for your mix, but give it your best shot. Get the vocal done as early as possible, and I'll see you in the next lesson.